Max, what do you know about Andrew Carnegie?
I know we got some libraries named after him.
He's the library guy?
We got universities. I know. I can tell you this much. I'll tell you what I know about him. He was born in Scotland.
Okay.
I know that much. He came over here
Mm-hmm.
with his mother, I believe.
This is true.
Is that true?
This is true. His mother was there, yeah.
Okay. Came over with his mother. When he got over here, he took a look at the political and economic situation in the frontier as relative to his homeland of Scotland and thought, wow, there's a lot more opportunity for economic mobility and freedom. It doesn't have to be sanctioned by the British Crown. You can go out and buy land. I'm going to go industrialize the American frontier. And he did that mostly around here in Illinois and Pennsylvania, and made a lot of money in the process. Was the richest man in the world for a while.
This is correct.
Do I get like a B plus?
That's like a B plus. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
You that was pretty solid.
All right.
What was his product? What was the thing he made?
Carnegie's steel.
Carnegie was the big steel.
Well, eventually. He made iron and pig iron, that kind of thing, and then eventually got into steel.
That was when he hit his stride.
Yes.
He's Mr. Steel.
He's Mr. Steel.
So yeah, Andrew Carnegie, if you had a historical education, anything like mine, you probably had at least one day in your middle school U.S. history class where you had to debate whether certain important figures in American history were robber barons or captains of industry.
Yes.
Did you have the robber baron
totally
captain of industry
Dude,
debate?
yes, you just unlocked a memory. Because, yeah, it was, there were, you think about, like, the Rockefellers and you think about all of those old-timey billionaires and stuff. There were...
Rockefeller had oil.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt
had
trains.
the railroads. Yeah.
Carnegie had steel. Those are the only three guys I remember
Yes.
from middle school history class.
But there was that kind of dichotomy of some of them were more givers and some of them were more takers. Like some of them, and this is probably a romanticized version of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember learning back then that some of them made a lot of money and gave a lot of that money away. And they would accumulate wealth and use that wealth to develop towns and build communities. And then you had some that just hoarded the wealth and just kind of sat on it and used it to buy political influence and keep themselves very wealthy. I think it's not unlike the time we live in now, from what I remember.
Yeah, this is one of those questions about living in capitalism that just kind of comes up. Nowadays, people will say things like, should billionaires exist? We're always litigating the morality of these really big rich guys. And that is the reason why it is still important to talk about the subject of our video, Andrew Carnegie. So Andrew Carnegie was born in 1835 in Scotland.
Dunfermline, is that right?
Dunfermline, yes, that was the name of the town he was in. And to understand the world that Carnegie was born in, we're going to talk a little bit about the historical context of Carnegie's existence. And we're going to do this through the lens of great power conflict. So, Max, how do you feel about wars between giant empires?
Ooh, this
Are
is
you
one of
like
my favorite
pro or
topics.
anti?
Well, that's what I love about it because we kind of like to put ourselves in those boxes, but it's so much more. There's so many shades of gray in between. Like,
what's your favorite great power conflict?
My favorite great power conflict, I think, is World War II.
World War II is kind of the go.
That's
really talked
as an
about
American, that's kind of the go-to. Like, it's the war where we're the most quote unquote good guys, right? And the most like enlightened, so to speak, and it's our empire against theirs kind of thing.
Yes. Great power conflict is a way of viewing history where you think of the most important things that are happening in history are big wars between big empires. And so yes, we live in the era that is very much post-World War II era, because after World War II, particular political order was constructed. America was one of the two big military powers, and then of course the Cold War
ended. That was one of the last big imperial struggles like that in our modern history, you're saying. One of the most impactful in our
It's the thing that defined what America is right now. If you want to understand America in the 21st century, understand how World War II happened. And in Andrew Carnegie's time, in 1835, Europe was just recovering in many ways from their own version of a Great War. So what do you think the Great War would have been in 1835 Britain? In Scotland, where Andrew Carnegie was born, what would they have looked back upon?
When were the Napoleonic Wars?
It's Napoleonic
Is that
Wars.
what it is?
Ended in
I pulled that out of the
1814.
dark. All right.
Yeah. So the Napoleonic Wars were a series of wars started by a gentleman named Napoleon.
I've heard of
Reason
short fella.
Short fellow.
Yeah.
Average height by the standards of today, but shorter.
Yeah.
For short. We can make fun of him for that because he got a lot of people killed.
Yeah. Yeah, you
So-
can make fun of short people when they're evil, I think.
Yes, you can. His whole deal is that he was the best guy at doing war, right? He was like, shit was going weird in France. There was this revolution. There's no more king. Like, what the heck is going on, guys? And then
Yeah.
Napoleon comes in, and he's just so good at winning wars. And, like, all these countries are just losing to him at war.
Is that a result of his strategy, his technology, or just...
Just his strategy and
Okay.
personality. He
He
was
was an
the best
ambitious-
military tactician. He
Okay.
could just win battles in the open field better than anyone. And because continental Europe was still existing in a political order which arguably goes back to feudalism, where power concentrates in whoever can field the largest and most effective armies
Okay.
and capture
Yeah.
the most amount of land.
Yeah, you're looking to control acreage.
But Napoleon lost. He eventually lost the Napoleonic Wars, even though he was indisputably the GOAT at his era of military campaigns. Why did he lose? What was Napoleon's mistake?
Ooh.
Do you know what he did? Because there's like a thing he did
I
that
mean,
is a mistake.
The joke that I was always like, oh, he was short and then he lost the war. I don't actually, I'll be honest with you, I don't think I know. Again, maybe because I'm American and we don't learn about the Napoleonic Wars that
That's
much
true.
over here. I don't know. I know that he lost. I know that
What was the country he picked a fight with that he
he
lost
picked a
again?
fight with the British Isles, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
British Empire.
Yeah.
But really, what I was trying to lead us to was when he invaded Russia.
He was just invading people left and right.
Yes, he had fought a number of wars. Historically, they are called the Wars of the Coalition. There were 6 of them. There were wars
Isn't
against...
that, I thought that's when we went to Iraq. We're the coalition of the willing.
Yeah, the Grand Coalition.
Yeah.
It's a popular word.
Okay.
But yeah, he had gone to war with kingdoms in Central Europe, Prussia, Austria-Hungary, the things that would become Italy,
Sure.
and the Spanish crown. So yes, he had gone to war with all the major European powers, but he hadn't really gone to war with Russia because, like, you can't really go.
Yeah.
They're just too big. And so he invades Russia, and because he is the GOAT of military, the Russian army just keeps retreating back and back and back and back into Russia, and then they burn Moscow down,
Wow.
and then Napoleon and his army retreat back to the center of Europe through winter, and a lot of them die.
Okay.
That was his mistake, was invading Russia. But there's a reason he invaded Russia.
Because nobody's ever won a ground war in Russia in the winter, right?
Yes,
you can't
exactly.
fight on their home
You
turf.
just
Yeah.
shouldn't try to invade Russia. If you're an aspiring military leader, just let Russia be Russia.
Yes.
But the reason that he invaded Russia was actually for very specific reason. It wasn't sheer ego. It wasn't grandeur. It wasn't just, I want Russia.
Okay.
It was a little more complicated than that.
There's methods to madness.
There's a method to the madness. What Napoleon had done is he had established an alliance of states on the continent of Europe,
Okay.
and this was a coordinated trade blockade against Great Britain. Because Great Britain wasn't really committing that much to the war, but they were definitely not going to play whatever game Napoleon was playing. They were
Yeah.
not going to enter economic alliance. This infuriated Napoleon, so he
Sure.
created a blockade. But the only way he could enforce the blockade was by beating them in the battlefield, beating these
Oh.
countries in the battlefield.
Okay.
Russia just decided they would try and get away with it,
Yeah.
and they got away with it. What Russia had done was simply allow their ports to be open to British ships.
Oh.
They just traded with Britain. And do you know what the major commodity produced by Great Britain during this time would have been?
This is, what is it, 1830s?
We're talking 18-aughts.
18-aughts.
1810
Okay, so this
is when Russia breaks from the continental system and resumes trading with Great
So
Britain.
this is early...
This is the start of the Industrial
You're thinking like this
Revolution.
is like Manchester and Birmingham. Like they're probably cranking out coal and textiles and...
Textiles.
Yeah.
It's textiles. The first several, honestly, arguably the entire basis for British power, at least at the first half of this century, it was that they produced fabric, and they produced more of it than anyone else could. And that's just really convenient, especially if you're in Russia and it's cold all the
And
time.
you need a lot of
and you
material.
need clothes.
Yeah.
And you got these factories producing more fabric than anyone else has ever made in
Yeah.
history. That's just easy. And okay, this guy says he's going to go to war with you over it. Like, who cares? Like, they make cheap stuff.
Yeah.
The thing that Britain had figured out, and this is my thesis right here, the way that they overcame Napoleon was not by beating Napoleon on the battlefield.
Okay.
Because that was the old game.
Right.
The old game, going back to feudalism, was having guys just like shoot and stab each other to death in the
And
field.
that's working harder. They wanted to work smarter.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
you just make like 1 billion coats,
Yeah.
everyone's going to want your coats.
Okay.
The thing
Control
that
the market. Yeah.
Here's my thesis is that the thing that Britain used to defeat Napoleon was that they figured out how to base their power on industrial manufacturing.
Okay.
And this is the era that Carnegie was born into.
Yes. So he saw firsthand as a young chap over in Scotland. He saw how the industrialization of his world lended itself to the strength of his world.
Or perhaps even more generally than that, that was just what you did at the time.
Yeah.
If you were a British person at the time,
fashion, yeah.
you got into industrial manufacturing because that is what had proven itself to be the thing that Britain could use to fashion an empire that became the dominant political hegemon of really the world.
It was like the 1805 version of buying like a monkey NFT. It was just like the thing to do at the time.
Cryptocurrency is the new version.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, Britain was not fighting Napoleon on the continent, but they were manufacturing enormous amounts of fabric. And this was part of a global empire they had already established, right?
Sure.
Cotton that they're using to make these textiles is coming from slave plantations in the American South.
So the slave trade is still full in swing at this point, even
still
over there.
Very fully in
Yeah.
swing. The transatlantic slave trade stopped, I think, roughly in this era, actually. I'm not sure precisely when, but the slave economy was still the basis for Great Britain's industrial power. And of course,
all that cotton had to come from somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Britain won. Britain suffered 300,000 casualties in the course of the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh.
Do you know how many casualties there were in the total of the war?
I feel like millions.
3.5 million.
Holy cow.
They suffered less than 1/10 of the casualties, but they still won because
Wow.
they just didn't play the Napoleon game.
Yeah.
They just won at industrial manufacturing.
They played the imperial industrial game. Interesting.
So it is into this era of British domination over the political order of Europe, economic domination across the oceans of the world, that Margaret Morrison Carnegie and William Carnegie are begotten a young child named Andrew. So we were just talking about cloth and how that was very important for the British Empire.
Big money maker.
Big moneymaker. This is the thing that employed a large number of people in the day, but Dunfermline was a little bit behind the times in a sense, in that their fabric industry was not industrial like it was in, as you mentioned, Birmingham, Manchester, I believe Leeds, it's a city that comes up. William Carnegie was a damask weaver, and this is a type of fabric that was just, this was the industry of the town. Everyone made damask, but there was not a factory.
Did they have looms and stuff, or would you just sit there and weave by hand?
They had looms.
Okay.
I'm going to read to you a passage that I find to be very beautiful. This is from Joseph Wall's biography of Andrew Carnegie, and it's describing what the act of weaving damask looked like.
Yeah, lay it on me.
The sound of a loom in operation, although noisy, is not disagreeable. It has none of the harshness of metal striking metal, nor the monotonous pattern of the carpenter or cobbler's hammer. There is a pattern of sound, but it is broken in its rhythm, rich in variety, and curiously pleasing to the ear, even in dissonance. Andrew was happy when his mother would carefully lead him down the steep outside steps and into the loom shop. His father, William, would beckon him over to stand close by the bench at the loom, and the child, silenced by the clatter about him, would watch in awe as his father's feet danced lightly on the treadles, while at the same time his hands worked the driver's stick and the batten. The bodily movements required of the weaver are as complex and rapid as those of the organist. Even more fascinating is the wonder of the emerging patterned cloth of the web that slowly rolls up on itself before one's eyes. Andrew never tired of watching this phenomenon of his father's skill, and in his earliest ambition, which both he and his father confidently expected to be realized, was to become a weaver. So that was what people did all day in Dunfermline. They would be in their houses and they would just be clacking away at the power loom.
Interesting, dude. I mean, I always knew that Carnegie had this industriousness about him, or this industry about him, but to know that he grew up as a little guy and would be taken down into these workshops, and his father and people in his town would be there making things around. Like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense in retrospect. That's awesome.
And it's a way of manufacturing things that, unlike the large steam-driven power looms that were in other cities, this is a very personal craft. In fact,
and it's not a big, nasty, polluting thing. It's like a more of a hypnotic craft that they're engaged in, right? It's less Like they said, less monotonous and more personal and more interesting.
Yeah. And damask weaving, according to Heritage Craft UK, a charity, is a critically endangered heritage craft.
Really?
So nobody weaves damask anymore, and part of the reason is because the industrial manufacturing of cloth was just something that individual makers, individual weavers, like William Carnegie, simply couldn't keep up with. The damask weavers of Dunfermline, they were very much at odds with the interest of industrialization, because industrialization would inevitably lead to the mass production of the thing they make, and they'd be out of the job. Kind of a classic story of
Luddites. Kind of, they were like, we don't want.
They represent an old way of doing things that is just being lost out to the unstoppable machinery of industrial progress.
Right. Our
so
life will be automated someday.
Because of this decline in the profitability, the feasibility of being a self-supporting damask weaver, that the Carnegies eventually immigrated to America, where it was told to them in bad faith that there was a market for damask cloth,
Oh, really?
and that people who were weavers could simply go over there, and it would be as if those power looms in Birmingham didn't exist.
So that's
of
what
course-
brought them over here was, hey, you can come over and weave in the New World.
Exactly.
No
and
way.
spoiler alert,
Not
William
really.
Carnegie gets there, and he is unable to support himself, and
I
he
would
ends up
imagine.
being largely financially supported by his son. Andrew Carnegie is from Scotland, and I want to just take a moment to talk about the position of Scottish identity. So Andrew Carnegie grew up Scottish, but perhaps more importantly, he was British. So the word British a lot of times gets misused by Americans, so I do want to define quickly what Britain means and why Britain was invented.
Yeah, give us a little
So-
geography lesson here. What's the difference between England and Britain here, for those that don't know?
So Britain is the name of an island. It is a large island in the North Sea that contains England, Scotland, and Wales.
It's the big island.
It's the big island.
Yeah.
You know what it looks like, right? England is just one kingdom on this island, and it is the most populous, and it is politically the most dominant, as evidenced by the fact that the road signs everywhere in Britain are probably in English.
Yes.
I say probably. I've never been to Great Britain.
Unless it's like an old Welsh town written in like Gaelic out of novelty, or it's just an old name. Like, things are written in English. Yeah.
Yeah.
At
And
least today.
Scotland was the kingdom to the north, had been frequently at war with England. The process of unification was something that it's really hard to put firm dates on it, because the boundary between two nations is contested, and they'll fight, and then they'll form some sort of treaty which creates some sort of political union, and then they'll fight. So there was really a slow process of Scotland being brought into the fold of the English kingdom. But I think if you had to affix a date to when the political independence of Scotland was no longer feasible and was not being fought for by anybody, this is almost 100 years before Carnegie was born. So have you ever heard of the Battle of Culloden Moor?
Yeah.
So
I don't know a lot about it, but yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about it either, but it was a battle. It was part of some sort of a succession dispute for the British crown.
Okay.
Some of the Scottish lords preferred one guy, and they went to war against the Redcoats.
Yeah.
And it did not end well for them. The person who was overseeing this battle, the British general, the Duke of Cumberland, is the younger brother of King George III, who was at the time just the crown prince of Britain. But yeah, the Scots try to rise up, and they get massacred, and there's never really any inkling of real armed Scottish insurrection against the British crown.
So once they got really beaten down once, they were like, we probably shouldn't try that again. It was kind of
Probably the last time. I wouldn't even say once. I'm sure there's a long history of Scottish
Yes, but after the most recent
defeat.
Defeat.
Yeah, they were defeated, and they became subsumed into the British identity. So instead of England imposing its will onto Scotland and making Scotland England, England and Scotland were both going to form, and Wales. Welsh erasure, shouldn't be doing that. Those three countries become a single new identity, British, and this unified British identity, that's the industrial power that forms its empire, which is why we call it the British Empire, not the English Empire.
Right.
But if you're talking about earlier English history, you do differentiate England and Scotland.
Yes.
So by Carnegie's day, these two nations were not one and the same by any stretch of the imagination. They were very strong cultural
but they had
differences.
formed some semblance of a union.
And Carnegie would have grown up speaking English.
Okay.
He probably did not speak Scottish Gaelic natively. The damask weavers of Scotland were very much at odds with the interests of the empire, because mass production was going to run them out of a job.
Yeah.
But in many ways, they also relied on it because they needed the cotton being picked buy slaves in the American South to come across the Atlantic, be turned into thread so that they could buy it. And then when they made their cloth, they assumed that there would be large consumer markets in continental Europe and increasingly across the world as British ships sail far and wide, sell their cloth to India, Egypt, I think Latin America. Britain was getting its fingers in those pies.
So they're enjoying the positive aspects of an industrialized society while fearing what it's going to do to their livelihood down the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
As is
kind
of the
case.
perpetual dilemma.
Yes.
So the Carnegies pack up. They leave Scotland. Carnegie is roughly 10 years old.
Okay.
He has a younger brother named
Thomas.
Thomas, thank you, who is, I believe, about 5 or 6 years his junior. So the four Carnegies pack up, get on a steamship that goes to New York.
Do they come in the traditional, like, Ellis Island and everything? Or?
I don't believe Ellis Island existed at this time.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough, because this was 18...
This would have been 1846, roughly.
Okay. Yeah, there's no Statue of Liberty, nothing there.
No Statue of Liberty. There's not even a California yet.
Yeah.
America was still, like, probably in the middle of fighting
You barely got
Mexico.
in Illinois.
You barely got Illinois.
Yeah.
There's no Fort Worth, Texas. It's just an unrecognizable nation. They get to the port of New York. They get off their ship. They get on another ship that takes them to Albany. They get off their ship. They get on another ship that takes them on the Erie Canal to Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
At every single step, they're getting swindled by people who are... Their only business is to deceive immigrants.
Really?
So it's a
just
very...
tourist trap, kind of, like
Get them to overpay for passage, get them... Yeah, it's just...
Like when you land at an international airport and there's someone there trying to sell you maps or whatever. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt real quick. We got a visit from our producer. What's up, Eli?
Hello.
We just got joined by our producer, Eli. Eli, what do you know about Andrew Carnegie?
You know, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I hear a lot about Andrew Carnegie every day. I see buildings with his name on it.
Yeah.
You pray to him every day.
You pray to him every
pray
day?
to
Say
him
the Pledge
every
of
day.
Carnegie every day, yeah.
I know about the homestead rides, but outside of that, I don't really know who the guy is.
Did you know he was from Dunfermline, Scotland?
No, I did not.
There you go. Did you know that his family were weavers of fine textiles in Scotland?
That's what I tell people when they ask me what my parents did for a living. They weave fine textiles.
My father was a damask weaver and my mother was a grocer.
Yeah.
She was a shopkeeper and she sold pickled vegetables to the townsfolk. Margaret Morrison Carnegie, she was a thrifty individual. She because William Carnegie couldn't really make enough money selling damask cloth, she opened up a store in their front house, in the front room of their house. So she was kind of a... you could say she was a girl boss.
He got a little bit of his entrepreneurship from his mom.
You could say primarily from his mom.
Yeah, because I don't know a lot about his dad, but I definitely have heard more about his mother.
His dad passed away, I'm going to say within 10 years of them moving to America, of ill health because they moved to a rancid, pre-sanitation, industrializing slum in Pittsburgh. Yeah, they would, and there were rats everywhere probably, and it smelled like horse poop.
Yeah.
So they moved into a real gross, disgusting, nasty, rough and tumble Pittsburgh. They didn't actually move into Pittsburgh, they moved into Allegheny.
Pittsburgh's north side, yeah.
Pittsburgh's north side. While Carnegie's father unsuccessfully would buy passage on steamships carrying big old loads of his damask cloth, he would go down the Ohio River and try to sell his wares and
really
discover...
like go into the frontier country, Detroit, Chicago, the Great Lakes. Like we control the Northwest Territory, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And the Louisiana Purchase has been done, so we have all of that.
And this is around the time of the Mexican-American War, so
Yes.
Texas, the Southwest, and California are being acquired. At this
Yes,
moment.
that's in the mind's eye at this time, but it's
Yes.
not. Okay.
The Carnegie family is having some trouble making ends meet, so Carnegie naturally has to get himself a job. So the first job that he gets is probably the most miserable job that you can imagine doing as a child. This is just peak awful child labor. He was shoveling wood chips into a boiler. This boiler powered a steam engine that powered a factory that made bobbins, which were spools of thread. So you're seeing, again, this is the reach of the British Empire.
Yeah.
Even out here in Pittsburgh, you're still part of an integrated fabric-based...
Textile manufacturer.
it's a textile cotton empire.
And do you know how old was he when he got his first job?
I'm going to say between 12 and 16.
Okay.
This is like an
Young chap.
young to
Yeah.
mid-adolescent, every day,
Okay.
on his feet all day.
Wow.
Dark basement by himself with a giant furnace in front of him.
Must have been 1.5 million degrees Kelvin down there. That must be brutal.
Yeah, he hated it immensely. Eventually, the person who owned that bobbin factory realized Carnegie was good with numbers,
Yeah.
could write and read a little bit, clever child. So he got him out of the boiler room and had him working upstairs as a clerk. And then,
So he got promoted to some white collar work almost immediately.
pretty much immediately, yeah. But he would not have this job for long. So, thanks to a chance encounter between Carnegie's uncle and a friend of his over a game of drafts, which
Drafts.
I think is
What
some
drafts.
spelled like draughts.
Yeah, like drought almost. Like
Some sort of a card game that Scottish unks would do in
Yeah.
Allegheny in the 1840s. I'm really
Okay.
not sure.
Somebody out there has played drafts and is probably very familiar. It sounds very British. It sounds like something we don't quite have here anymore.
I had to run a small steam engine and to fire the boiler in the cellar of the bobbin factory. It was too much for me. I found myself night after night sitting up in bed trying the steam gauges, fearing at one time that the steam was too low and that the workers above would complain that they had not power enough, and at another time that the steam was too high and that the boiler might burst. So he was having nightmares about this job. This is like a little traumatizing for him.
No, you know what this is the most 21st century sheltered and comfortable version of that, but that's like when
I've had dreams where I'm using a computer interface, but
Yeah.
never something like that. That's
I've had
interesting.
friends that have played a lot of Call of Duty and they'll be like, dude, I went to sleep and there was like a crosshair like in the middle of my vision.
That's actually very interesting. I've never had that.
So he's just spending all of his waking hours trying to keep this little gauge in between green and red, basically. Like keep it right in the yellow.
Yeah.
And he's doing that all damn day every day, that he's going to bed dreaming about it at night.
And this is the 1840s, where steam engines very often explode catastrophically and kill lots of people.
Eli, have you ever been standing near a steam engine while it's exploded?
I don't think so.
No.
Continue. This is a different story, but there was a big steamship inaugurate. The U.S. Navy built a really big steamship, and so President as they do, and this is the 1840s, and that was a big deal back then. So President John Tyler, who had taken over.
About Tyler.
Now Tyler, he was people didn't really like him because they didn't really know if the vice president was actually supposed to become president. He just went out and
that
did
was
it.
like unprecedented. He just assumed
No president had died before, and so he's not very popular. He also has I believe it's a secretary of the war who really, really wants Texas. Because Texas had just become independent.
They just ceded from Mexico.
The whole South is just they want Texas. Texas yearns to be America, and America yearns to be Texas.
Yeah.
But this is very unpopular. And then this big steamship gets made. President goes on it. Secretary of State, whoever it was.
Donald Rumsfeld at the time.
Boat just explodes.
Yeah.
Kills that guy.
Yeah.
So then those plans get halted for a little while. So steam engines just used to explode and kill people, including really critical people in the U.S. government.
Wow. Even under military supervision and precision, they would just blow up and kill people.
Yeah, even the best steam engine in the world.
Oh my God.
So here's how Carnegie got out of this miserable job.
Yeah.
So one evening, early in 1850, when I returned home from work, I was told that Mr. David Brooks, manager of the telegraph office, had asked my Uncle Hogan if he knew a good boy who could be found to act as a messenger. Mr. Brooks and my uncle were enthusiastic draft players, and it was over a game of drafts that this important inquiry misspells inquiry, was made. Upon such trifles do the most momentous consequences hang. A word, a look, an accent may affect the destiny not only of individuals, but of nations. He is a bold man who calls anything a trifle. Who was it who, being advised to disregard trifles, said he always would if anyone could tell him what a trifle was? The young should often remember that upon trifles the best gifts of the gods hang.
Wow.
I kind of love it when Carnegie spits poetry, because he's recognizing that the entire reason he became rich and famous is just a cosmic coincidence that this one guy was looking for a good boy to run messages.
Yeah, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
And his uncle knew a guy.
That's amazing.
So he gets a job working for the O'Reilly Telegraph Company, running messages around Pittsburgh. And the job he had, honestly, it sounds kind of dope. He was not a telegraph operator. The telegraph office would receive messages through their telegraph, their central office, and then they would have to deliver it to a certain person.
So he would take a telegraph and turn it into a telegram and give it to somebody, basically.
Yes, he was the messenger boy. He would run with the telegram. And so this means he learned all the streets of Pittsburgh. He learned names and faces of basically all the important businessmen, and they learned his name and face. He got really good at just like chopping it up with adults at a super young age.
Just shooting the shit with important people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
So already he's kind of on the he's kind of beast mode. Like he's kind of like a crazy
and he's
crack
16 or something at this time?
Let's say like 13, because that's
13?
more impressive if he's a 13-year-old. I don't actually know.
But I mean, it's like younger than graduating high school. Like he's a teenager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before what we would consider adult nowadays, and certainly too young to be the breadwinner of the family, but increasingly so. He becomes the breadwinner of his family as his dad makes less and less money. Andrew Carnegie starts getting buddies of his jobs at the telegraph company.
Wow.
Eventually,
come work for me. Deliver some messages.
Yeah. Already he had the hustle mindset. He understood. Now, in the course of his job as a messenger boy, he becomes acquainted with a gentleman named Tom Scott.
Oh, okay. I've heard of Tom Scott.
This is not the British YouTuber.
Not the YouTuber
who was afraid of roller coasters, but then got on a roller coaster and overcame his fears, because it made me overcome my fear of roller coasters. God bless you,
He
Tom
also
Scott.
landed a 737 without ever having flown a plane. You see him in the simulator doing that? That was
oh no, wait.
also incredible.
Well,
not that Tom Scott.
No, not that Tom Scott. God
Different
bless him.
Tom
Tom Scott, if you wanted
the superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
So right? It sounds like you already know a little bit about Mr.
Oh,
Tom
but
Scott.
those watching, or listening rather, can go and hear me briefly butcher this story in one of our latest videos.
Yes.
So I'm familiar with the name, but yeah, tell us about Tom Scott.
Tom Scott was in charge of the western half of the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad was a private company that ran trains across the state. Right at this time, they had just finished the very first rail connection over the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, wow. I don't like the way you pronounce that, but I'll let it slide.
Appalachian, yeah. Pardon me. I'm a disgusting Yankee.
You're new to town, it's all right.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm also going to say, am I saying Carnegie or Carnegie?
Yeah, well, how did he pronounce it? That's actually worth bringing up, because I've noticed, I'm from Pittsburgh, and I say Carnegie. As soon as I went to the Midwest, when I lived there for a little while in Chicago, everybody looked at me like I was saying a name they'd never heard before.
Yeah, I don't think anyone outside of Pittsburgh pronounces it Carnegie, which makes me think that that's probably how he said it.
Yes.
Because, this is where he lived.
This is where he lived, and we still...
People remember.
And that there is a slight Scottish thing of, putting the emphasis on the second syllable, like Dunfermline, right?
Yeah.
But
they just put trains over the Appalachian Mountains. And this was a big deal because they were the first railroad company to do it. So the Pennsylvania Railroad...
Well, and now Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are linked, right? That's the biggest.
And then by extension, Pittsburgh and New York as well.
New York City, yes.
So they were sending a lot of messages naturally. And Tom Scott realized that it was useful to have a message boy of his own. So he hires Andrew Carnegie. And now Andrew Carnegie is working for one of the most important men in the state, because Tom Scott is the gentleman who oversees... So Pennsylvania Railroad, okay, it was like a railroad across the state, but it was really bad. Stone bridges
were
collapsing.
Rudimentary as hell.
Trains would derail. It was just... The safety was nightmarish.
Yes.
Working on the railroad was probably one of the most dangerous jobs you could have at the time. Once went to the East Broadtop Railroad Museum, and it is a old railroad museum. It's in East Broadtop,
okay.
It's near. It's in the town of Orbisonia, Pennsylvania.
I've lived in this state almost my whole life. I've never heard of it.
It's a really small town.
Yeah.
I went there for secret reasons, but I was talking to this guy at the History Museum, and he was sort of walking me around and explaining all the old shit. It's an old workshop where they used to fabricate parts for railroads.
Oh, cool.
And this is the story, perhaps apocryphal, but if somebody wanted to hire good railroad men who were good at linking train cars together, because that was the job, right? Very rudimentary. You just line things up and pin the two cars together, right?
Sure.
And when someone was trying to hire a bunch of railroad men, they would ask them to all put their hands up. The guys who had missing fingers were the guys you wanted because they had the most experience. Because it was just giant trains coming together, clip your finger off.
If you were missing your ring finger, it was like that's Billy with no fingers, and that dude has seen some shit. He's been working the railroads.
So this is a dangerous industry. Trains are derailing, bridges are collapsing, people are losing fingers. And so very often as the goods are being shipped across the state, a disaster will happen, and somebody's going to have to get on the telegraph and say, this train that's on this part of the railroad, divert, go onto the sidings, make room for such and such. You have
all
to
that crisis
move all the
management.
move all the pieces out of the way so that workers can come through, repair the problem, and resume traffic. Honestly, I imagine it wouldn't be too different from, or isn't too different from, like air traffic control.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
really like high volume of traffic. You can't fuck up, but when things happen, when things fuck up, you gotta deal with the situation. There was one day, there was a situation, Mr. Scott wasn't in yet, Andrew Carnegie hopped on the telegram, tip, 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 tapped his way, sent all the messages.
By the way, fluent in Morse code, right?
He knows how to, he's fluent in Morse code, he knows how a telegraph machine works, hops on that, sends all the right orders to all the right stations along the line, signs all of them with his boss's name.
Forges Tom Scott's signature.
But does everything correct. Nothing goes wrong.
He assumed the role of Tom Scott for the morning.
He became his boss, and then his boss came in, and there's a quote that goes something like, he was too afraid to say that I had done anything.
I remember that from the video. He was afraid to approve of what Carnegie had done.
That's what it is.
Because it was so ballsy stepping into that role with no authorization.
So Carnegie is already very ambitious, very important, incredibly confident, and unfazed by being in charge of an enormous amount of people, having literally people's lives in his hands. Because if he got some of these things wrong, you send two trains down the same track together,
you're liable for what's about to happen. Yeah.
So he's very good at doing this, and because telegraph is going to be so important in business communications throughout the next half century, the fact that he got this at a really young age kind of what gave him an edge on anyone else in business, is that he was the young guy who was really good with technology.
Yes. He was keeping up with the changing times, and he had an intuitive sense of how to manage and keep things operational.
Yes.
I mean, clearly, if you could move trains around and keep them from crashing and stuff, you can, at some level, control things and
like capital.
And like capital,
and
other things that
abstractions
are
of value and workers and materials.
Right, yeah.
So that is what Carnegie is very apt. He has an aptitude for that at a very early age. This is around the time which William Carnegie passes away.
Okay. He got ill at some point.
Probably from living in a disgusting city and dying of asthma or something sad.
And just drinking gonorrhea from the river. And
yeah, something like that.
I doubt Pittsburgh's North Side was a clean place in 1835.
No, probably not. So it is around this time that we should ask the question, what did Andrew Carnegie think of slavery? What do you think Andrew Carnegie thought of slavery?
Wow. Okay, you're throwing the slavery.
Because this was an important thing. Carnegie was a very politically inclined individual. It was actually quite part of his family's tradition. There's a political movement in Scotland called Chartism, which is going to be seen as like a liberal political movement that was trying to establish some sort of document which delimited the rights of people and the restrictions on rulers. And this was very popular in Scotland.
Like a new Magna Carta kind of thing.
New Magna Carta, or a Bill of Rights, or something new to enshrine the concept of human rights as it had become.
So he grew up in this Enlightenment idea of like individual rights and freedoms and stuff. Like that was a part of who he was and where he came from.
Yes, and he held these ideas very, very dearly to himself. And so when he moved to America, there are actually extensive records of his letters to his cousin where he's arguing about politics.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things he tells his cousins is that the goal of Chartism in Scotland has largely been realized in America with the Bill of Rights. So America, like many people in his situation who move to America and they see the opportunities afforded by this place, he becomes a real proud American. He's very, very eager to defend his new homeland. And of course, an uncomfortable fact about his homeland is that slavery is practiced in a large part.
Yeah.
And the products of that slavery are necessary for the economic engine of not just the whole United States, but of the entire British, European
And by the way,
system.
it's probably worth mentioning, not just a system of slavery, but a system of racial subjugation and discrimination. And it was slavery based in how people looked and what their heritage was.
Yeah, it was
It
slavery
wasn't-
based in the idea that there was a thing called white people and black people that
Yeah.
were fundamentally different. That was the
We forget sometimes that, but it is different from a lot of other types of slavery that the world had seen until the transatlantic slave trade.
yes. Also, not all forms of slavery involve the physical ownership of another person. A lot of
Sure.
earlier Mediterranean forms of slavery were closer to just what we might see now as just wage work, just having a job. 'Cause
Yeah.
you would
Being
you'd be
working
a
class,
slave, but you'd have
yeah.
a house you go to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a thing which Carnegie had to wrestle with, and he mainly just kind of explained it away to his cousin by saying, "Well, we don't do that in the North.
Oh yeah, those are the other
bad.
Americans.
It's bad, but like it's what like we don't have any slaves.
Yeah.
We don't-
I live in
It's not
Pittsburgh.
like it's not good, but like it's not us.
It's not what I do. Yeah.
And so then a little something happens in America over slavery. There's kind of a tussle.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the mid 1800s here.
Yeah, you got 1840s is when they get there. America acquires Mexico, get all this Western territory, and
And
the issue
suddenly,
of whether or not slavery
Yeah.
should go into this land is just
people are asking. We got Kansas. We got Nebraska. We got Texas. We got. What should we be doing there? Should we have enslaved people? Should we? How is that going to work? And how can we keep that proportionate in Congress? And how can we adapt to a growing landscape out west and maintain this institution of slavery?
precisely.
Yeah.
And so there ends up being a bit of a civil war over this.
No bit. Yeah, I've heard of it.
So this gentleman named Abraham Lincoln is elected president. All these folks in the South not very happy about this,
Yeah,
especially the
way too
people
popular.
who own the people. They're like, Abe Lincoln guy,
Just a
it's not
bridge
gonna
too
fly.
far.
It's a bridge too far.
And by the way, a lot of people will tell you, the Civil War is about states' rights and things like that, but it was the states' rights to own slaves. I mean, that's very like South Carolina was the first. I'm right in saying right, the first
Correct,
state
yeah.
to secede. They said in their articles of secession, "Hey, we're sussed out that Lincoln not that he wants to abolish slavery, that he doesn't want it to spread."
Yes.
So it was very. They were the Civil War. This could be a whole separate episode, but
Yeah.
it was very clearly fought about slavery and the expansion of slavery.
Yes. I believe it was Alexander Stephens, vice president of the Confederacy, who said that the Confederacy is the first government in I'm paraphrasing, the first government in human history founded upon the great moral and physical truth that the white race is superior to
Yeah.
the black race, although you didn't use
That was
the
their
word
belief.
black.
Yeah, they use
So-
a worse word. for
They
that.
use the word that is not appropriate to say anymore. So yeah, the Civil War starts, and there's an interesting thing about the timeline of the Civil War where South Carolina secedes
Yeah,
after Lincoln is elected, but before he's sworn in.
yeah. So he hasn't even done anything.
He hasn't even done anything.
Yeah.
They secede, and so the government of the president James Buchanan is just not doing anything. James
Yeah.
Buchanan makes a couple speeches where
Because
he's like,
he's the lame duck president.
He's
Well,
the lame
Lincoln
duck.
is president elect.
yes, and Buchanan just kind of goes, "Stop! Why stop it? Like, guys, don't fight! Stop!" And so more and more states secede, and there's a decision made by his Secretary of War, who is a very pro-slavery Southern Democrat.
Okay.
Now,
The
there's this
Dixie
armory in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
It's called the Allegheny Arsenal. There's a cider company named after it now in a school.
In a park, you can go
In a
see.
park, yeah. So there's a big factory there where they make guns and stuff. And all of a sudden, the Secretary of War is like, hey, we need to take like 130 cannons and send it to Texas. And the
Out
people,
of Pittsburgh.
yeah, out of Pittsburgh. And people of Pittsburgh were like, hold up.
Why are we
The
doing
state
that
that's
exactly?
saying it's not America? Like,
Yeah.
or actually, I believe they hadn't seceded, but the state that's probably going to secede. What are you up to? And so
Yeah.
they petitioned the city government, and the city government stopped
Mr.
it from happening.
Buchanan, are you protecting the Confederates?
He was certainly not stopping members of his own cabinet from making moves for the Confederate
Okay.
interests. And the cannons do not leave. The people of Pittsburgh successfully petition the city government, which comes in and is like, yeah, wait a second. Keep those cannons here for now. Let's see what the next guy has to say.
Wow.
And of course,
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln says, we need millions and billions of cannons.
Yeah. We're going to war.
Lincoln takes office. Again, there's still a bit of inaction. Fort Sumter, which is a fort held by federal troops in the harbor of Charleston, the capital of South Carolina, gets bombarded. Interesting thing about that story, the whole time, like months and months before the bombardment, they knew it was going to happen. They like see,
Really?
they see the South Carolinians preparing batteries pointed at them. And they're like, "Hey, government, should we do something?" And the government's like, "Hold up." And
We
Lincoln
might have
takes
an
office.
insurrection on our hands.
And then Lincoln takes off, and they're like, "Lincoln, what are we doing?" And they're like, "Hold on." And then South Carolina gives them an ultimatum. They refuse the ultimatum. They get bombed. That's the start of the Civil War.
So is that?
It was the first act of military destruction taken on
and
behalf of the Confederate
Once they
colonies.
crossed that line, they realized we can't just let you go. We're fighting to keep you in the Union.
And then Lincoln puts out the call to raise an army. Large numbers of people enlist because they're just so excited to kill people, right?
Is that kind of what it is? Is that why there's not a lot of sentiment of like, okay, just let them secede? It's like, no, we believe in standing up to y'all.
We believe in the Union. And also, war is just cool. Like, you get
Yeah.
to go to another place.
Yeah.
You get to learn how to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
You learn all
You
these
might
great...
lose a finger. You
might lose a finger, but, you learn lots of great soft skills. You make friends for the rest of your life.
You keep a little portrait of your sweetheart in your pocket.
Exactly,
They
when
just
you're in the
invented
trenches.
photographs.
Yeah. And, there hasn't been, like, a good war in, like, 15 years.
Yes.
There hasn't been, like, a real solid, just, like,
People are a little trigger happy.
kill the enemy.
Yeah, okay.
So people
It is
signed up in
America,
droves.
after all. Yeah.
Yeah. People signed up in droves from northern states to join Lincoln's army. But in addition to people, Lincoln also needs minds who know how to run the increasingly complicated logistics of war. Because it has become clear by this point, because industry had largely adopted the telegraph and railroad, that the government was going to have to make use of these incredibly important industrial manufacturing and communication.
So the government had to
technologies.
learn from the private sector how to communicate well over vast distances.
Exactly, because you got to remember at the time, the federal government, in particular the military, it had always been growing. It's always been growing in American history, more or less. But it was really not doing very much. The federal government didn't have the kind of huge, sprawling military bureaucratic apparatus.
Well, and they weren't. The federal government didn't do back then what it does today.
Exactly.
It was a different,
And so Abraham Lincoln had to figure out who is the best guy at telegraphs in the country. He comes upon the conclusion that Mr. Tom Scott, superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
How does he fit that on a business card? Really?
Yeah, they didn't have business cards back then.
He had to carve it in stone.
Yeah, they would use cuneiform. That's so Tom Scott is brought in to the U.S. military to help with the organization of troops, and of course, Tom Scott needs his trusty sidekick, the young Andy Carnegie, who is at this time 24 years old,
Okay.
23.
But he's kept his job at this telegram company for almost a decade now, right? If he was 13, 14, he's now in his early 20s.
Yeah, somewhere 5 to 10 years he's had this job.
Yeah, okay.
So
So he's proven himself a loyal and trustworthy manager and employee of goods and freight and transportation.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the key issues that Abraham Lincoln and the Union Army was facing is that troops coming from northern states were unable to get through Maryland, which was still part of the Union, but was a slave state and was really looking like it was going to secede. If you know your
was
early
teetering.
Civil War history, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, was trying people, or convicting people without trial. It was, bad shit was going on in Maryland, including Confederate sympathizers destroying infrastructure for the railroad, which I think would have been B&O.
I was going to say, is
It's a
that
different
Baltimore and Ohio, or is that too early?
Some important railroad, whatever. They were ripping
Going
off.
from
It's-
Pittsburgh to D.C., essentially. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or from like Philly to D.C.
Okay. Yeah.
They were bringing the troops in from the Northeast Corridor to D.C. to form a big army, go to Richmond, and tell those damn rebs what is what.
Yeah.
And that they shouldn't
give 'em
fuck
what
with
for.
Abe Lincoln. Go
Yeah.
give them a what for.
Yeah.
But they can't get there because the trains are all messed up. And so they got Andrew Carnegie in the front cab of this train. As the people in the front cab spot obstacles, some dudes from the train run out. They move the tree or the whatever has been put in their way. Train keeps on rolling. And eventually, Carnegie notices that a telegraph wire has been staked to the ground, which grounds the current so that the telegraph wire running next to this railroad is not communicating end to end. Honestly, he was probably pissed off because that's his telegraph wire.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
his thing. And the rebs were messing with his thing. So he runs out of the train car personally, pulls up the stake, the wire becomes taut, slashes his face. And this is the thing which he would later claim made him the first man wounded in defense of the nation's capital.
Which is such a funny thing to say.
Yeah, because people on that train like straight up died in like the most horrible ways you can imagine.
Yeah, with
he's like, I'm basically a veteran if you think about it.
Dude, I'm basically an absolute hero. I took a telegraph wire to the cheek and it left a slight mark. Meanwhile,
I got a boo-boo for
everybody else that I was there with did not come back.
Yeah, they like got their limbs
Yeah.
sawn off in the best case scenario. I got a little boo-boo, which honestly, I haven't even gotten a boo-boo.
I know. I was gonna say I've never gotten.
Who am I to say?
I've never gotten a war injury, so I can't really talk shit.
Never even gotten a war boo-boo.
And it's better that he was doing something. Rather, he could have just stayed home. I mean, he was there doing something. So
he was
good
there
for
doing
him.
something. And you got to imagine this is pretty exciting, right? You're 26 years old. The biggest war ever in America is about to happen, and you're like literally.
Oh, I can imagine.
You're in the front. He's at the head of an army.
Yeah.
You got to imagine psychologically what that does to a person when you're at the head of the Grand American Army.
Yes.
So the army gets to D.C. There's like some kind of training, but it's very haphazard. There's not enough of the kind of infrastructure to take in tens of thousands of recruits at once. Yet, obviously, the U.S. Army would get really good at training tens of thousands of men at a time.
Yes.
And then sending them to.
But that big apparatus didn't really exist yet.
And it wasn't very good. And so the troops get off at D.C., and they get on another train. They start heading south toward a town called Manassas Junction, Virginia, which is on the way to Richmond. And the plan is to just go to Richmond. And if you meet the Confederate Army in the way, boom, you give them the what for.
Yeah.
Get out of the train. They're outside Manassas Junction. Confederate Army rolls up. Immediately, it turns into a rout.
Wow.
Right? It's a very short battle. This is where Stonewall Jackson does the thing that makes him Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah.
That like low-key maybe didn't really happen. He's like
but
kind
we
of
can pretend it happened.
we can kind of pretend it happened
Sure.
for the legacy and honor of Stonewall Jackson.
Sure.
Union Army ends up fleeing back, and Carnegie is also in this train as well. He is on that transport that brings the troops back, that brings the troops into Virginia, and he's on the transport that brings the decimated army back to Washington. So while he didn't see combat, he was far from the battle, he probably saw people with some horribly, just mortifying wounds.
Yeah.
So you could imagine he might have got just a touch of PTSD.
There's some
from
shell
that.
shock involved in that, I would think, yeah.
And for the country as a whole, there was a bit of shell shock because Lincoln's great army marched south, immediately got beaten, retreated back. Just a bad look for the Union.
Yeah.
Really showed people.
And meanwhile, in Maryland, you have like brothers fighting brothers, and you have like in some of those states where it was kind of on the edge, like things were fraught between people and between people that were maybe amicable 10 years earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, things were getting rough.
Things were breaking down, and it was scary. So that battle happens. It's called the First Battle of Bull Run.
Okay.
They just called it the Battle of Bull Run then.
That was before the second battle.
It was before the second Battle of Bull Run.
Okay.
They go back to Washington, and Carnegie keeps working. I don't have super great details about what his job is, but he was in the Telegraphers Corps.
Yes.
Is in Andrew Carnegie's biography, he talks about meeting Lincoln. Probably met him, took some personal messages for him.
Wow.
So this, at the age of 24, this guy is second in command at the largest private railroad company in Pennsylvania, one of the most important in the Union.
Yeah.
He's been at the head of an army, and he's met the president.
That's, at 25 or whatever.
So he probably thinks pretty highly of himself. He has a lot of confidence in his abilities.
I would think so.
And eventually, as the summer of 1861 progresses, Carnegie, in the course of that summer, he gets a heat stroke. Never quite recovers from it. He remains, for the rest of his life, having a bit of a fragile constitution around heat. Doesn't do well.
Fragile constitution. That's a new one. I like that.
So he got leave to go back to his job at the Pennsylvania Railroad.
He left the swamp in D.C. and came back to the woods.
To the frigid mountains full of smoke.
Yeah. I gotta get the hell out of the swamp and go back to the smoky hell, which I know.
I gotta go back to icy hell with the lid off.
Yeah, literally.
But he was fulfilling an equally important role on the home front because, as the incident with the Allegheny Arsenal during the Buchanan administration shows, Pittsburgh, while it wasn't a strategically important place of conflict during the war, this was this was the Union's industrial heart. This is the thing. People talk a lot about how the Union had every numerical advantage, right? They had more people, they had more miles of track, they had more manufacturing capabilities. Pittsburgh was the thing really that
That's
tipped
what
the
set
scales.
them over the edge. Yeah.
New York was a big one. I don't think Chicago's a particularly big city. There's not a whole lot out west. Pittsburgh is your manufacturing center.
Yeah.
And the Allegheny Arsenal was an incredibly important part of the war.
And we might even, if we can flash like a map from around that time of Pittsburgh, and you can see just how much of the real estate of the city is dedicated to armor factories, munitions plants, iron and forging places. I mean, things are getting ramped up for wartime production. I mean, you can tell.
Mm-hmm. This is around the time that Andrew Carnegie realizes that you can do this little thing called investment.
Yeah.
This happens to
I've heard of that in America.
Every man in his 20s at some point thinks to himself, I should start trading stocks.
Just start buying low,
I bet I could.
high.
I bet I could play the stock market. Listen, it's okay.
We've all been
It
there.
happens to all of us. Sometimes
It's a coming of age moment.
Sometimes you lose money. Sometimes you become the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
Andrew Carnegie started doing that, and he realizes that it's so easy to make money without working. You just have to know what is a good business.
He realized the truth of the new feudal capitalism, which is, oh yeah, labor makes money, but money makes way more money.
Money makes money.
Yeah.
And
you can work hard again, or you can work smart.
He's the guy who
clicked at a point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing which Great Britain had figured out in order to defeat the great French emperor, the great Corsican emperor. It's what the Union is going to use to beat the South. Now, it's not exactly a one-to-one because we're talking about series of wars that happened half a century apart.
Sure.
But it is
But
broadly
it's the same
similar.
premise of banking on your industrial fortitude.
The industrial power beat the other power, although it's not like the Confederates had a brilliant strategy. I feel like Robert E. Lee's low-key overrated.
Oh.
Separate story. Robert E.
That
Lee's
can
no
be
Napoleon. Fight
episode
me,
2.
Neo-Confederates.
You're going to get a bunch of, crazed Mississippi guys. How dare you insult my favorite president?
So anyways, the war continues, and it drags on, and it drags on, and it drags on. There's a really great quote in the Wall biography that I'm not going to bother finding. Describes, very poetically, it says, to the people in the northern industrial cities, the war was some vague cataclysm happening out in the south into which no amount of men and materials could end.
Wow.
And they were just sending people.
It was just a black hole of death and money.
Yeah. And it was a great time to be in business and not be a soldier.
I would imagine.
And one such business that Carnegie invested in was a small iron forge operated along Gertie's Run, town of Millvale, Pennsylvania, operated by 2 German fellows.
And this is where the story becomes a little familiar, at least to me. And
This
maybe to you if you're listening and you've seen our videos before, you might know where this part's going.
If you know a little bit about those history guys, if you've watched the content, if you've watched the prequels, you know that what's about to happen next.
If you know the extended universe of those history guys.
Yeah. You know what's about to happen here. There was a small iron forge where 2 German brothers named Andrew Kloman and Anthony Kloman buy up scrap metal from the very large industry factories around them. They would fashion it into railroad axles, and they would sell these to companies that were building.
The original reduce, reuse, recycle, turning trash into a product.
Literally the most scrappy immigrants.
Scrappy immigrants, yeah.
Guys who moved from Prussia.
God, I love it.
Running this business, and wasn't a good business. I'm sure it was brutal work, but they also profit, and there was potential in that industry.
There's potential to grow, and they were also lucky enough to build a mill at a run that had running water that can turn machinery. I mean, they were, again, like Carnegie, in the right place at the right time, and an opportunity was beginning to present itself.
And it is on that note that we're going to take a quick ad break, and you're going to hear from our sponsors selling nicotine pouches and gambling.
But when we get back, learn all kinds of stuff that you never knew about Andrew Carnegie and his life as a baron.
But first, enjoy these ads.